Hi guys, so today we're going to compare the range of two different functions. One, g of x is given graphically. So the range is nothing more than the y of the function. What are the y values being used in the function? So as I go up this y-axis, notice that the y values being used start at 1 and they go all the way up to, we're going to say infinity because we don't know when this stops. So for g of x, the range would be from 1 to infinity. We put the 1 in brackets because the value of 1 is included in this function, and parentheses around infinity since we can't actually specify that value. And then a little more difficult for the range of f of x because we don't have a graph to go off of. Instead, we're just given this function. So the y values being used in f of x, we're not going to know just off looking at it. So we're going to have to use the domain first, which are what we know about the x values. So one thing we do know about a square root is that it must be greater than or equal to 0, meaning we can't have a negative inside of that square root. So we're going to determine the x values that can be used, and then from there, find the range or the y values. So first thing I'm going to do algebraically is to get rid of the square root, which is to square both sides now. The square and square root get rid of each other, leaving you with x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. And then I'm going to move 1 to the other side, which tells me that all the x values being used have to be greater than or equal to negative 1. So what does that do for me since I'm looking for the range or the y values? Well, anytime you have the x values, you can substitute it in to find the y values. And I'm going to use values that are negative 1 to something greater. We'll say 3. So to find the y values, we're simply going to substitute it in. For instance, x is negative 1. We're going to replace the x here with negative 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. The square root of 0 is 0, and 0 minus 1 is negative 1. If I replace the x with 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. The square root of 1 is 1. Minus 1 gives me 0. So all you're doing is substituting the x with the values that we've used that are greater than negative 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. 2 minus 1 gives us 1. So what are we doing with these y values? Well, that tells us what we can use for the f function. We can use y values from negative 1 all the way up to infinity. And if we look at the question, it says, what value does the function f of x have in its range that's not in the range of g of x? Well, since we can start at negative 1 and g of x doesn't start until positive 1, we have this little gap here of y values that can be used for f of x only. So those y values would be negative 1 to 1. And we'll put a parentheses around the 1 because that can be used for g of x, since 1 is actually in its graph. All right, guys, I hope this helps.